Boy, you say one thing just remotely wrong, and you got 18 people texting you and complaining about you. We'll get to the bottom of this home run single controversy a little bit later on. Graham Renz joins us, policy researcher for the Show Me Institute. However, he was banned from the show. It was a soft ban until he was able to watch Vision Quest starring a young Matthew Modine. Did you watch Vision Quest?
I did not, but I had emailed my wrestling coach, and he told me during one wrestling camp a long, long time ago that we indeed did watch it. So it's somewhere in my brain. I simply can't recall it.
Well, the fact that you can't recall such a brilliant movie as a high school wrestler calls into question lots of things. Will you do me a favor, do your grandchildren a favor, and go and watch Vision Quest?
I'll have to do it. I couldn't find it on Netflix. So.
It's out there somewhere. You crazy kids, find it out there. It's somewhere. All right, Graham Renz. Tomorrow, the city of St. Louis gets to vote on whether or not an MLS stadium is in the future for St. Louis. You want to talk about the economic impact of that MLS stadium.
Yeah, that's right. So first job I got out of college, I worked for a really successful politician in Kansas City, and he gave me a great piece of advice. He said, Graham, if you want to succeed, always under-promise and over-deliver. He said, things will go great that way. You'll never disappoint anybody.
Right.
And it seems like stadium proponents are doing the exact opposite. They're promising the moon. They're promising huge, sums of new tax revenue, jobs, revitalization of downtown, all this great stuff. But if history in St. Louis is any indication, history in cities across the country tell us anything, it's that the stadium might have to underdeliver. 85% of economists agree that we should be eliminating subsidies for sports stadiums because they have a negligible impact on the economy. So if we're considering this as an investment, the $60 million that city voters are going to be asked to part with, it might not have the greatest returns.
First of all, 95% of climate scientists say climate change is real, but we choose the 5%, but that's a different story. Let me challenge you on this, because we had Rainford on Friday.
Sure.
And he said, and these are his words, not mine. He said that this is certainly not the silver bullet. This won't fix everything. He said, but it will certainly pay for itself. Do you agree?
Well, again, if we look, we've seen this a lot of times here in St. Louis, especially. If these things were such great deals, one, we'd think private investors would be lining up. But secondly, you wouldn't have to pay people to come up with studies that show how great these things are, right? You could point to the millions of, or not millions, right? The other cities across the country that have just done great on these investments. And there aren't a ton of those cities. So
right, no, but I don't think anybody's saying this is going to solve all of St. Louis's ills. I think they're saying is it's not going to cost the taxpayer money. Yes, there's going to be this business tax that's going to be diverted to pay off the bonds. $50 million. They're putting in $255 million of their own money. So at worst case scenario, in terms of dollar for dollar, it's going to be at least a wash, and probably they're going to generate more taxes than what are going to this project.
Yeah, according to the promotional study that they've conducted, right? And if you look in the fine details, they make some pretty rosy assumptions. They assume that attendance is going to be 90% or higher for 30 years. They assume that every man, woman, and child is going to spend on tickets, concessions, $50, and that spending is going to increase faster than inflation for 30 years. So you just have to take it with a grain of salt.
All right, so that's one. Now let me ask you about yesterday. So yesterday, downtown was jam-packed. Blues, and then the Cardinals. There were people spending money all over town yesterday. You couldn't get into Ballpark Village. You couldn't get a cab. You couldn't get a parking spot. Downtown was rocking. Are you going to tell me that wasn't have some type of economic benefit for the city of St. Louis?
Well, of course it does. But what we don't see are all the shopping, all the spending that those same people don't do elsewhere because they're now doing it at the stadiums.
Right.
So economic consensus shows that people only have so much money that they can spend on entertainment, whether it's going to the movies, going to restaurants, going to sports stadiums. So what we see is when we subsidize these stadiums, when we subsidize Ballpark Village, we see all the activity there. But what we don't see is all the activity that isn't happening elsewhere now because folks are going there instead.
So instead of buying $14 nachos at the stadium, I would have bought a $20 piece of lumber at Home Depot somewhere else.
Yeah, right. Or lumber, or not lumber, or restaurant somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
It's more or less picking winners and losers. We subsidize a stadium, we subsidize Ballpark Village, what have you, and we see people go there. They do well. for a lot of reasons, but because they have a subsidy. But they would have been spending that money somewhere.
Right. You can't argue, though, maybe you can, I don't know, but the argument that it's a cultural resource. It's just, I like soccer. I want to go to a game. I like sports stadiums. I think it's fun. I want to live in a community where I can follow a sports team. And so it's going to cost me a couple of dollars. I'm okay with that because I want a soccer team and I want to see them play and I want to cheer them on.
Yeah, no, if your goal is to have a soccer stadium, have a soccer team, and you see the tax revenue that, that you're going to have to pay is worth it.
Right.
I can disagree with you on that personally, but I can't argue with that. But what I can argue with is whether or not a stadium is a good public investment.
Right.
Right.
Right. No, I hear you, but I mean, but if it's a break even or it's whatever else, hey, they're not losing any money, and I want a soccer stadium because it's another, like the zoo, like the Botanical Garden, like the Cardinals, like the Blues, like the Arch. It's another cultural institution that adds to the fabric of the community. Sure,
it is, but again, just same thing with the spending. What we don't see, what we don't get, the investment or the return we don't get on, or the things that public money could be going to. Right.
We can both agree with this, that even though the Rams left and they had that stadium deal, the nice thing is that they took that money and reinvested all that money into roads and infrastructure and schools.
Yeah. So the question is not whether that money that actually has gone there, but that it can go there.
Yes,
right? If there were a different proposition, right, there'd be different consequences.
Right, but I mean, but that money never ends up going to the schools or the teachers or the police officers or anything else. That money just doesn't go anywhere.
Well, I don't know if that's an argument for the stadium or not.
Well, no. But these people who are like, no, the money should go towards schools. Well, yeah, we made that argument with the Rams. The Rams stadium's not built, and that money didn't go into anything because there was $100 million by the NFL, there's $100 million by Stan Kroenke, and whatever else money by the city of St. Louis. So this one is they're asking for $50 or $60 million from taxpayers over the course of 30 years, and they're putting in $255 million.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and it isn't like they're hurting another soccer team here in town.
No, that's right. But again, just a couple of months ago, they were asking for twice the public money, right? They were asking for another $20 million from the city and $40 million from the state.
Right.
When the expansion fee came out $50 million lower than what they were expecting, they didn't reduce their ask from the public.
Right. Well, there's no question. I mean, there was a negotiations, and the city cut a better deal than was originally proposed. So. People are going to vote on it, right? The city voters are going to vote, and what more? Whereas with the football stadium, that was a shove it down your throat, both times really. And so this one is the people are going to vote on it, and so we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
What's interesting though, I think, is if it was in the St. Charles County or in St. Louis County, it would pass overwhelmingly, but I'm not so sure in the city.
Yeah, and no doubt this is a better deal than previous deals. But being the worst, the best worst deal isn't always great. But again, whether or not this is going to be an economic boon for downtown or for the city, I think that's something that we should really think hard about.
I mean, I'm not a soccer fan. I barely even know how the game's played. But you don't have to be a baseball fan to appreciate what happened yesterday in downtown St. Louis. It was just a lot of fun. Whether you're baseball, whether you went down there or not, it was just a lot of fun that people had a good old time. All right, Graham. More on the website?
Yep, showmeinstitute.org.
All right, showmeinstitute.org. And then go see Vision Quest. Do yourself a favor. Graham Renz, policy researcher at the Show Me Institute. Have a good week.
Thank you, McGraw.
8:47.